let's talk about Mayor Duterte. I mean, he's been compared by some writers to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But if you read Time Magazine today and many other articles, the New York Times, after really looking at Duterte's background compared to Mayor Digong, many have said that really they're not the same.
Absolutely not. I've written on this on CNN, Al Jazeera, among others, and my argument is this: campaign trail is campaign trail.
Yes.
You know,
so the bravado and the language, jet ski, all these jokes, it doesn't define him as a president.
And my point is this. You see, we know that the Filipino public is very anti-China, and we're very sensitive about the sovereignty issue. So you have to do what they call crazy Nixon moves. Remember, Nixon could do a deal with China because everyone in America believed that he was a tough guy. He's going to get a good bargain with China. So if you look weak, and you look like pro-China, the moment you make an agreement with China, automatically you're going to be tagged as doing something fishy, right? So I think it actually strategically makes sense for him to come with all of this braggadocio, this bravado. I'm going to stand up to China, plant a flag.
Yeah.
But behind this is actually...
and plant a flag.
But behind this is, I think he's a classical realist in a very reasonable, sober way.
That's very
and I think if you really scratch below the surface, this guy understands what's happening in the region.
Do you think that in the last elections, the problem with many of his opponents is they failed to scratch below the surface? I mean, clearly, the headlines was his jokes, his cursing, all that, but then they didn't really fail to listen to what he stood for.
To be honest, even I at the beginning was just more looking at the headlines, but I got to research more about the guy. My God, he's not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a result of a reality show, hit. But when it comes to Mayor Digong, he had 20 years of executive experience with relative success. Some would call Davao the Switzerland of Mindanao, not only Singapore.
And apparently the highest GDP in 2015.
Right. And if you look at the World Bank ease of doing business, at least I think it's second in the Philippines. So he has a lot to show actually in actual political arena, which is not there with Donald Trump. The other thing with him is that Donald Trump made abhorrent statement about Muslims. So now he has this problem that the London mayor is a Muslim. So he has to make exception. But with Mayor Digong, he always reminds us, the Catholic majority, that we have historical injustice against Muslims. We have to reach out to them.
That's true.
He's actually the most cosmopolitan.
He's
the most cosmopolitan, perhaps, president we have ever had. He emphasizes his Muslim and Christian background. So I'm very glad that the Western media finally is, retuning their kind of portrayal, this one-dimensional portrayal of Mayor Digong, which I think is unfair to him and an insult to the Filipino people.
But do you think the Western media caught up faster than the local media? Because it seems to me that the thing with the local media, and I'm saying it just generally, was there's just too much focus on the small picture. Like, for example, the cursing, this, that. But then at some point, the Western media was able to make a deeper analysis on exactly what he stood for.
I don't know. Of course, I think... to begin with, we were all surprised with the rise of Mayor Digong, right? He came out of nowhere. He's a political outsider par excellence, right? And I think, to be fair to him, the challenge for him is how to stand up. Remember, running for president
is stand out.
Stand out, right?
Yeah, I agree.
It's a job application, right? So you have these people with machinery, with the name and everything, and you come from a province, right? And you want to stand out, right? So the challenge for him to stand out, he stood out, sometimes a little bit over the board, right? But, at least he forced us, including us, the Wongs and journalists,
to actually look at him.
What's up with this guy? There must be something behind him, right? So finally, by the way, he has pro-LGBT, pro-women kind of programs. We got to see that he's actually progressive on a lot of issues. Of course, we have to condemn him when he makes
that joke.
Those things. I hope he never does that again. So the best I wish I have for Mayor Digong is to transition from a campaign trail, semi-loose cannon person who had to, stand out, and he successfully did that. Now he has to transition to a statesman-like, more reliable person. We're seeing that. We're seeing a different Digong, and I'm very, very glad about that.
All right. Now, I have a friend who's watching right now, and Joy is saying, I hope that Digong will be more of a Lee Kuan Yew than a Donald Trump. But, I wanted to ask you about this. Lee Kuan Yew was effective, but he was 30 years in office. I mean, that's 3 decades of running Singapore in an authoritarian manner at that, where the media was not free, could not report, let's say, decisions they didn't agree with. And let's face it, the limitation of a Mayor Duterte, even if he would have the heart of a Lee Kuan Yew, is he's just there for 6 years. What can you do in 6 years?
I'm not very, pleased with this Lee Kuan Yew kind of comparisons. First of all, Lee Kuan Yew was in charge of a city-state. He was a glorified mayor called Prime Minister. Let's be very honest about that. There are things you can do in Hong Kong, Macau, and Singapore that you cannot do in a country that has rural and urban divides. So this is a very maybe in Davao he could be some sort of a Lee Kuan Yew, but not in the case of the Philippines. The second thing with Lee Kuan Yew is that, of course, he was Cambridge educated and very more finesse. He never made those kinds of jokes, right? And he was not a womanizer at all. He loved his wife a lot. So I think Singaporeans would have issues with that. No, but I think why not Deng Xiaoping or Thaksin in his better way?
Right.
Because these are people who actually took charge of bigger countries with bigger difficulties. And if you look at
who's a good role model for Duterte, given his personality, who ran like a bigger country?
Yeah. For me, honestly, I think Mayor Digong is unique. He's going to be the universal Digong. And I expect in the future there will be a lot of Digong wannabes. So he is unique in his own way.
That's true, huh?
He's unique in his own way. I mean, Singapore in the 1960s was already a cosmopolitan, developed logistical hub, right? It was like a pearl of the British Empire. It was not Davao of the 1980s. Let's be fair to Mayor Digong. He took over
Davao
while...
in the 1980s, people were dying in the middle of the street.
Singapore was not that bad.
Policemen were shot right on the head.
Singapore was a lower middle income, relatively safe, cosmopolitan pace already in the 1960s. So all Lee Kuan Yew did was to take it to the next level of making it a developed city-state or country. But in the case of Davao, it was a whole different case. It was more of like a fourth world situation.
But what limitations is Duterte facing? I mean, here's a guy that clearly, he's made it clear. I'm going to be transparent. I'm not going to hide anything from you. And I don't think, frankly speaking, that, I'll be honest, wealth and luxury is his weakness. I mean, you've seen some presidents where it's absolute greed, enriching themselves, hedonism in power. I don't think he has that issue.
He is Lee Kuan Yew in that way.
In that way, because he doesn't smoke, he doesn't drink, he doesn't gamble.
Right. In fairness, I'll give that to him. But of course, the concern is that this is not a parliamentary system. You have 6-year limit. And the other thing is this. Remember, Lee Kuan Yew was very much known for micromanaging. So even how the pavements were done, how many trees should be there, he did that. Don't do micromanaging when you're dealing with the whole country. Because that's what Jokowi almost did in Indonesia, right?
Really?
And it was almost a disaster. So like someone had a problem, there was a fire in some place, he would go everywhere. Just imagine the security nightmare. You have to put snipers everywhere. You are no longer mayor. You're head of a state. So you have to learn to delegate tasks. That is why I'm looking at this cabinet, and I'm increasingly encouraged with the kind of technocratic, seasoned officials he's putting there. And by the way, he's going to also make it like a Justin Trudeau kind of a pluralistic.
So in a way, you're telling us, which I find interesting, is Duterte is really more sophisticated and cosmopolitan politically than many have actually accorded him. Because who would say, I want a Justin Trudeau cabinet?
Exactly. And he said he's going to put Muslims, he's going to put youth, he's going to ensure gender balance. So that's why I called it, maybe this is a new era, right? I mean, the old system of cacique democracy with this political correctness and the usual formula of who will be in the cabinet, he completely reshuffled again. That's why I called him a meta candidate. He's a candidate that changes the very conception and expectation of what candidate should be. So I think we have to be cautiously optimistic that we're looking forward to interesting times.
In an interview with David Celdran, this was before the elections, when Mayor Digong was hitting a 35. You told David that I think the world has a romance now with what you call the strong man. I mean, we're seeing it in many parts of the world. I mean, you have Widodo in Indonesia, you have Putin, I mean, who's quite popular in his own country.
And around the world,
And around the world, there you go. And then, I mean, and he's absolutely politically incorrect when he speaks his mind. Then you have Donald Trump, who's like, I don't know, I'm confused about him right now. But you get my point. Why is the world coming to that kind of leader? I mean, and clearly, populism. We're seeing it right now.
I'm not talking about Mayor Digong anymore. I'm talking about voters' preferences. So this is what I call strongman syndrome. This misguided, simplistic idea that you can solve complex 21st century problem if you put 20th century kind of strongman on the top. Put a tough-talking guy at the top, you're going to solve all your problems. I think this is a big mistake. And we see around the world, particularly in dysfunctional democracies with high levels of inequality. Turkey is one. Indonesia almost, Prabowo Subianto almost defeated Jokowi, but Jokowi also has his own kind of interesting side. In Peru, you have Keiko Fujimori, the daughter of former dictator who's now in jail, running and almost winning for presidency. I think that's expectations. So, and in US, you also have explosion of inequality and discontent. So many people are saying, forget about this democracies and checks and imbalances. There's so much debate and paralysis there. Just put a tough-talking guy there and everything will be solved. But, you know, for people like us who do comparative politics and try to understand challenges of the 21st century, my goodness, never expect one person to solve it. We have to do our job as citizens.
That's true.
And presidents never should micromanage. 21st century is about delegation of tasks and choosing the right people to rely on, right? Because if you try to micromanage things or you choose the wrong people and you delegate it to the wrong people, it's a recipe for disaster, no matter how smart your leader is. Because your leaders are not omnipotent, omnipresent.
But then I was going to say, today with the rest of the world, I mean, you're talking about economics worldwide, we're in 1% of the global population hold the world's wealth. I mean, do you see this as, in a way, one of the reasons why the world, I mean, voters all over the world are looking for candidates that are, in a way, more populist? Bernie Sanders is one. I mean, Bernie Sanders is absolutely, I mean, he's a socialist when you listen to him. Do you think because of the wealth inequality, it's a reason why we're veering towards that?
Okay, I'm going to sound a little bit Marxist here, but I'll be honest about it. I think what's happening right now is that for 100 years, democracy and capitalism went hand in hand.
I agree.
Now capitalism is devouring democracy. I mean, if you look at the US, it's not like a democracy. It's an oligarchy. There were a lot of studies done by folks in Princeton University that show that an average American has zero influence on final policy. Policy is determined by Koch brothers, by interest groups, Wall Street, and among other things. And that's an established democracy. You're talking about the US, which is the oldest modern democracy since 1776. Now, imagine fledgling democracies like the Philippines, Indonesia, etc. And the other interesting thing is happening is what Samuel Huntington in 1968 in his book, Political Order in Original Societies, identified. The thing that happens in actually rapidly developing countries is that while there's growth on the ground, actually expectations explode even faster. So at some point, there's this huge gap that is open to exploitation by some people who promise salvation. Let's be honest, Mayor Digong kind of did that too by promising 3 to 6 months, I'm going to solve crime and corruption.
He said suppress. To be fair to him,
first he said kind of eliminate, and then it became suppress. Okay, so I think it's good that he's making that clarification.
But I can imagine suppress, huh? I mean, just sheer fear.
Within the boundaries of law, I think that should be very clear. Oh, not only fear, I think inspiration is important. If you look at the meeting de Avance, 600,000 people were there. It was so clean afterwards.
Exactly.
Mayor Digong did not threaten them. They were inspired by Mayor Digong. They saw his discipline, simple lifestyle, and cleanliness in Davao. So people in Manila, everyone cleaned up. You look at the meeting de Avance, that's the kind of Philippines I look forward to. So you can lead this country not only through fear, but actually through inspiration. In that way, in that way, Digong could be even better than Lee Kuan Yew.
Okay, before we go to a quick break, are you open for a cabinet post? Chinky Tan is asking.
I think I'm too young for that, but I would...
No, I mean, it doesn't have to be like a secretarial post, but I mean, I feel like with your experience and your point of view, should you be in like a foreign policy kind of post in government? Would you want to work for government?
I'm open to helping my country, no matter what. Maybe during the campaign
You speak Chinese?
I would try to learn that.
When it comes to negotiating with China?
Well, I have a lot of friends and all in China. I mean, colleagues and academics. And I think even though I don't understand Chinese directly, I think I try to understand the complexity of their politics. But by the way, I'm not endorsing myself. I'm just trying to defend myself as an academic. Right?
All right.